not actually going to touch on any fights on the prelims. I haven't had time to go back and watch them yet. I've seen a couple of the highlights. Chimaev's teammate kind of did what we expected him to do, although, for those in the know a little bit more about him, he isn't as good as maybe the win on the Contender Series made out. For context, his opponent on the Contender Series had lost on the Contender Series before, come back, fought a guy who was 0-5 or 0-4, and then obviously jumped in with Chimaev's teammate. It is what it is. UFC 319 was all about the main card for me. And the main event, I was seriously excited for the main event. I spoke you through and I analysed the main event last week on the podcast, and I picked DDP. On Saturday morning, I changed my pick to Chimaev, and the reason for that is just Khamzat Chimaev feels inevitable. He was dominant in this fight, and it was borderline. If DDP hadn't have shown the heart and the grit and the determination that he had, it was borderline an embarrassing performance from DDP. But because of the grit and determination that he showed, he comes away with a lot of. I think DDP's stock doesn't drop massively due to the loss. 50-44 on all scorecards, obviously a 10-8 in there. I'd probably say that was a third round myself. But seriously worrying performance if you're a middleweight. And now the announcement of the fight provided some fireworks. Chimaev, tried to get in DDP's face when DDP was having his name announced. And then round one starts. 8 seconds into the fight, into the round, Chimaev lands a takedown. I thought he wasn't very busy with the takedown, which proved to be, the sort of case for the entirety of the of the fight. Really, he was like a blanket on DDP. He would not let DDP get up at all. Du Plessis, I thought, was really good from his defence in the first round. At least was really good in the crucifix position. He managed to stay close to Chimaev. He managed to turn his head to the left and stay out of harm's way for the most part. Those strikes that were landing for Chimaev weren't powerful. They were doing no damage to Du Plessis. His defensive legwork was really good. He was from the crucifix position. He was sort of preventing, and from side control as well. He was preventing Chimaev stepping over and full mounting him. 10-9 in the first round for me, for Chimaev. Round two starts. Du Plessis in the corner was jovial. He knew that he was going to get taken down. It is what it is. Round two starts. Takedown in 13 seconds. Now you're beginning to think, come on. You knew you were going to be taken down, but you're not really showing anything. You're not really showing the sort of determination to get back to your feet. I've put in my notes, I'm looking over here for my notes. Round two was boring. DDP wasn't expending much energy, and nor was Chimaev. Chimaev was just doing enough to maintain the position. Another 10-9 for me. DDP again goes back to his corner. Okay, yeah, you had spent best part of a round now on your back again, or being controlled by Chimaev, I should say. It's time to get busy now. You need to throw caution to the wind a little bit. It's the third round. You've lost the first two. So now, if it is to go to the judges' scorecards, you have to win all three. You have to win all 3 rounds now. He had 0 successes in those first 2 rounds. I don't think he landed a shot in those first 2 rounds. Round 3 starts, takedown in 11 seconds. And round 3 for me was a 10-8 for Chimaev. He got the crucifix position again. DDP didn't do well enough in that third round to defend himself. I thought, there was opportunities there for Chimaev to really do some damage. Chimaev now knows that he can just take down Du Plessis whenever he wants. There's no threat from Du Plessis now. So land the elbows. Really go and look to hurt DDP. Land the elbows, hurt DDP, cut him maybe, and if he gets back to his feet in a scramble, that's fine, because you can just take him down again. That was a 10-8 round for me. So now I've got Chimaev 3-0 up with a 10-8 in there. 30-26 on my scorecard so far. Round 4, a little bit more on the 20 seconds in, takedown for Chimaev. Again, didn't do an awful lot of damage on the floor. And it was just Chimaev. If you look at him, he's not a very muscular guy. You know, he hasn't got big biceps like a Jared Cannonier, for example. He hasn't got a big thick chest. His strength comes in that he is just the best wrestler. He must have some insane strength to be able to take down DDP, who was in there, I believe, the much bigger guy. But Chimaev just did enough again to just keep on top of DDP, completely prevent DDP from doing anything in the fight. He got nothing off in the fight. Chimaev could fight another 5-round fight today and he would be absolutely fine. I thought it was a weird decision to separate the two men in the 4th round, but it didn't matter to Chimaev, who just, you know, the two men were separated for not staying busy enough, and Chimaev just landed another takedown almost instantly after that. Why not? What's the worst that can, you know, for DDP, you have that little bit of, you know, maybe that little adrenaline rush. Right, I'm on my feet again, and I'm already on my back. I've already got Chimaev on my back. It was a really dominant performance. And going into the 5th round, it felt a little bit like Leon Edwards, Kamaru Usman 2, when Edwards knocked out Usman. You knew that du Plessis had to just do everything that he could put everything out there that he could to get the finish, because he needed the finish. Winning the round was not going to be enough. He needed to land something, which was proved to be very difficult for DDP. And the takedown came in 19 seconds for Chimaev. So you're talking, you know, round 1, 8-second takedown. Round 2, 13-second takedown. Round 3, 11-second takedown. Round 4, 20-second takedown. And round 5, 19-second takedown. And although DDP had his moments in that 5th round where, you know, he mounted Chimaev at one point, he looked at locking the guillotine at one point, it was all Chimaev. It was all Khamzat Chimaev. 50-44. I think the only other, well, off the top of my head, the only other performance that dominant from a challenger was Amanda Nunes versus Juliana Pena 2. And you know what my thoughts are on that. Juliana Pena had no business being in there. You know, yeah, 50-45, 50-44 and 50-43. I don't want to say she had no business being in there. That was a slip of the tongue. But she got dominated in that fight, just like DDP got dominated in this fight. But I've written in my notes, what did we really learn about Khamzat Chimaev? We learned that he can go for 25 minutes, but not at a hard pace, because that was not a hard-paced fight. He just dominated the fight. What did we really learn about Chimaev? We learned that he's a better wrestler than Dricus du Plessis. I feel that that's what we learned from this fight. He's a better wrestler than Dricus du Plessis. A phenomenal performance, and I want to take nothing away from Khamzat Chimaev. He, for me, jumps right up the pound-for-pound list. He's obviously now the middleweight champion. But we didn't learn anything we didn't already know. We knew that he can take down any single person in the 185-pound division and dominate them. We knew that he had heavy ground and pound. It wasn't really shown in this fight. We may never know if he's a great all-round MMA fighter, because he will likely do this to every single opponent that he faces until he chooses to give up the belt. I cannot see anyone in the middleweight division or on the fringes of the middleweight division at the moment challenging Khamzat Chimaev for that belt and it being a competitive fight. I think the person that would give him the hardest fight, despite the fact that he's not ranked, you know, as high as you know, some other people that are probably going to get the shot. You've got Imavov, you've got Carvalho, you've got Renier Derrida. I think Fluffy Hernandez gives him the toughest fight, because he's a nightmare, Fluffy Hernandez. I think he's got really good submission game. Obviously, Renier Derrida has as well. Those two guys are probably the two guys. I don't think Imavov or I don't think Carvalho give Khamzat Chimaev a tough fight. Like I said, we may never know if Khamzat Chimaev is a brilliant all-round MMA fighter, because we won't see him. Why would you choose, if you're Khamzat Chimaev, why would you choose to stand with anybody in the division? even if you think you're better than them in the stand-up game. You know, let's say he faces Israel Adesanya next, and he lets his ego get the better of him a little bit, and he stands with Israel Adesanya for a couple of minutes, and then he'll just take Israel Adesanya down. Same with Sean Strickland. Sean Strickland put something on Twitter. Shock. Sean Strickland is essentially a Twitter troll at this point. But Sean Strickland put something on Twitter about being the man that can break Chimaev. Sean Strickland will get broken by Chimaev and finished by Chimaev within 2 rounds. That's a fact. No one can deal with that kind of wrestling in the middleweight division. I think the only person off the top of my head in the UFC that could deal with that kind of wrestling is maybe Islam Makhachev, who's obviously much smaller. You've got... He's just a phenomenal all-round fighter. We may never know if he's a great all-round fighter, but he's a phenomenal wrestler. He's a phenomenal wrestler in MMA. He's got phenomenal submission offense. And we don't need, if you're Khamzat Chimaev, you don't need to prove to anyone that you're a phenomenal all-round mixed martial artist, because your wrestling is so elite, and he will do that to every single person he comes up against in the middleweight division. Caveat to that, and quite an important caveat for me, he is a massive star now. Khamzat Chimaev is certainly top 5, maybe top 3 biggest stars in the UFC as of today. Well, as of last night, as of 3:19. But if he's going to take that step up to being the biggest star the UFC has, that fight for me didn't help him. He proved to many that he could go 25 minutes, which is very important. However, he needed to finish that fight for me. The dominance that he showed in that fight, what would have really put a stamp on it for me is if he would have finished him in the 5th round. And I think the finish, potentially was there in that 3rd round, a few more ground and pound elbows. Take the risk of losing the position. When you're that dominant a fighter, you can afford to take the risk of losing the dominant position, because you can just take him down again if he gets into dangerous, tricky waters. First round, 4 minutes and 47 seconds control time, 1 significant strike landed. Second round, 4 minutes 47 control time, 4 significant strikes landed. 4th round, 4 minutes 26 seconds control time, 4 significant strikes landed. Topuria is probably the biggest star that the UFC has at the moment. Ice Charles Oliveira, Ice Max Holloway, Ice Alexander Volkanovski. Tom Aspinall's up there. Ice his opponents. This is why people like Magomed Ankalaev are not a huge name. Alex Pereira used to just ice opponents. Khalil Roundtree, Jiri Pashka, Jamal Hill. Ice these guys. Khamzat needs to finish his next fight. Straight, simple as that. And will he do it? I think he will. I think that he is, without a doubt, the best fighter in the middleweight division. But I do question the level of opposition that he's going to come up against now, because he's so elite. He is so far, in my opinion, ahead of the pack at middleweight. I think next maybe Reinier de Ridder. I think he dominates Reinier de Ridder. I think he finishes him in the 3rd or 4th round. After that, maybe we're looking at the winner of Kyle Bahalo and Imavov. I don't see how any of them deal with the wrestling of Khamzat Chimaev. If you're Dricus du Plessis, you wake up and you've got nothing to apologise for. You apologise in his post-fight speech, but I can see him competing for about this time, next year or towards the end of next year. He needs to take a little bit of time off because he's been very active as a champion, which is something that we love. But I want to see him take a little bit of time off, sort of lick his wounds a little bit, and then return against the winner of Imavov versus Kyle Bahalo, in my opinion. I think that's the fight for him next. That's essentially a number 1 contenders fight, but I think Reinier de Ridder may skip the line with that performance over Robert Whittaker in Abu Dhabi a few weeks ago. I think he skips the line. I think he may be next. And I think the winner, let's say off the top of my head, Carvalho wins that fight. I think DDP's next for Carvalho. But what a performance by Khamzat Chimaev. Probably, in recent memory, the most dominant performance we've seen across 25 minutes from a challenger. And he's got the selling point. He's undefeated. Someone else who is undefeated, who will be realising a title shot soon, is this man right here, Leron Murphy. Leron Murphy will, no questions asked, needs to be next for Alexander Volkanovski. He went into this fight on short notice, taking into account, he hadn't had a training camp. Pico had been training. Yes, it was training for Movsar Evloev, but he had been training. He'd been, working up to his UFC debut. And it was a frantic start to the fight. It was a really frantic start to the fight. No questions asked. 3 weeks notice and no real benefit for Leron Murphy from this fight other than a potential title shot, which is a huge benefit. But if he wins, he beat the Bellator guy. This guy from Bellator. If he loses, he's out of the title picture. He's undefeated, 17-0 and one draw. That was not a draw. He won that fight. It doesn't get any cleaner than the knockout that he landed. He landed the elbow, the spinning elbow, second in a row. We'll go on to talk about the first one in a second. The 10th only in UFC history. And Pico was out on his way down to the mat and he landed one follow-up shot, which technically wasn't needed, but it is what it is. You fight until the ref pulls you off. It does not get any cleaner than that for Leron Murphy. And that is why he will be getting a title shot next. Pico was in a bad way. He was out cold for a long, long time. Dana White said in his post-fight press conference that he was transported to the hospital. Now, if I just pull up the... let me just quickly check the UFC rankings for the featherweight rankings, sorry. Because Leron Murphy will be next. You've got the champion Alexander Volkanovski who welcomed the fight. You don't often, get a champion sort of almost calling out a contender, but Alexander Volkanovski said December, let's do it. That gives Leron Murphy, 5 months to prepare. Absolutely the fight to make for the final card of the year, a pay-per-view card of the year. But you've got Movsar Evloev, who's ranked number 1. I'll come back to him. Diego Lopez just lost to the champion. Yair Rodriguez has already lost to the champion. Somehow, and I don't know how, Brian Ortega is still ranked number 4 in the featherweight division. Hasn't won a fight since 2024. Hasn't put back-to-back wins together since 2017, 2018. I've got no idea how he's still ranked number 4, but it is what it is. Then you've got Arnold Allen, who is, in a difficult place at the moment because he's got a few losses on his record. I think he's lost his last 2 straight. He lost 2 on a bounce to Max Holloway and Evloev, and then he beat Giga Chikadze, and then you've got Leron. So why wouldn't you give Evloev the shot? And there's a specific reason for this. We always talk about the UFC being built on holy shit moments. The only holy shit moment that Movsar Evloev is giving us is holy shit, that's boring. Let's be honest. Let's call a spade a spade. Movsar Evloev, no one is staying up in the middle of the night if you're from the UK. No, Movsar Evloev fights, you go to the bar if you're in attendance. He's got 8 UFC fights, 8 decisions, Hasn't finished a fight since 2018, and that was for M1 Challenge. Sorry, 9 UFC fights, all decisions. Not one part of Movsar Evloev's history suggests that he should be in a title shot, other than the fact that he's 19-0, and that's no slight. 19-0 is a difficult record to have. 19 men have tried, 19 men have failed, but quite frankly, 19 men have tried, 19 men have failed, but many more than that have gone to sleep watching Movsar Evloev fights. Now, I'm not saying that Leron Murphy is a distinct finisher. However, you look at his UFC career, he got that draw away in Abu Dhabi, which again I don't think was a draw. Then he TKO'd Ricardo Ramos, performance of the night bonus. He then went the distance with Douglas Silva de Andrade, and then he KO'd Makwan Amirkhani. He then had a run of 5 straight decisions, one of which was fight of the night and 2 of which were headline slots. One was against Dan Ige, who just does not get finished. He's got 10 losses on his record, has never been finished. And then he's just put in a performance of the night, winning first round spinning back elbow knockout against Aaron Pico, after saying that he was going to make a statement. And that picture for me there, says it all. Get the man a title shot next. Straight up. The man is next for Volkanovski, and I think that's a competitive fight. But we'll go on to talk about that a little bit nearer the time, if and when that happens. I just want to quickly speak for 2 minutes on Bellator guys now being 0-3 in their UFC debuts. And I'm going to throw Kaya Sakura into that. Maybe not Bellator, but obviously the Rising. I'll go on to talk about Kaya Sakura in a little bit more detail later on. But Bellator guys, you got Pitbull, lost to Yo-Yo Rodriguez. Patchy Mix lost to... Was it Jonathan Martinez? I can't remember who Patchy Mix lost to now. Was it Martinez or... No, it was Mario Bautista, I believe. Yeah, Mario Bautista. And then you've got Aaron Pico now being iced in that first round. Now, for Patchy Mix and Pitbull, they got comprehensively outpointed across 15 minutes. The only upside for Pico, if you can call it an upside, is that he didn't get iced. He got iced. He got absolutely put out cold. So he didn't get dominated over 15 minutes. It's a difficult one because, if you get a spinning back elbow knockout on your UFC debut, coming in with all that hype that Pico did, it's going to be difficult to see any positives from it. But he can claim that he just got caught, and he can come back. With the other 2 guys, especially Patchy Mix, Patchy Mix has now been sort of, I don't want to say relegated, but now he's relegated to welcoming other people to the UFC. Obviously, Pitbull did bounce back against Dan Ige, but he himself has been relegated to welcoming new guys to the UFC. Kaya Sakura is now 0-2 as of last night in the UFC. I'll go on to talk about him in a minute, like I said. I think it's really... We always knew that Bellator, the standard of Bellator was not as good as the UFC. We know that. That's a known fact. But you're sending over people like Patchy Mix, who is supposed to be one of the best guys in Bellator, or PFL, or whatever you want to call it these days. You're sending over Aaron Pico, one of the best guys in Bellator. Pitbull, historically one of the best guys in Bellator. You're sending these guys over, and they are getting comprehensively beaten. And granted, Leron Murphy is going to be next for a title shot. He was ranked number 6. You had Yair Rodriguez, I think, was ranked number 2 or 3 when he fought Patricio Pitbull. Mario Bautista, highly ranked when he fought Patchy Mix. But you have to remember that many people, including myself, have historically thought that people like Pico maybe, caused Leron Murphy a few problems. I really thought Patchy Mix could potentially be a UFC champion. They're ruining the facade of being 0-3 in their UFC debuts, and convincingly 0-3 in their UFC debuts. Like I said, I'll throw Kaya Sakura into that a little bit later on. But it's time we stopped putting Bellator guys in with the elite of the division, because it's clear to see now. It is clear to see. The evidence is there. They are not elite fighters. Aaron Pico is a phenomenal fighter. He's just been iced in 3 minutes by Leron Murphy. He's a great fighter. He's a phenomenal wrestler. He's got heavy hands. Stop putting him in with the best in the world, because they will get exposed. Same with Patchy Mix. Same with Patricio Pitbull. I'm now racking my brains of people in the PFL, Bellator, whatever you call it these days, who could come over to the UFC and jump straight into the top 3 or top 5 of the division. And there's one name for me. One name for me, I think. I'll say 1.5. Nemkov could. I don't think he would. There's one name for me that could come over to the UFC from the PFL at the moment and compete in the top of the division. It's Dakota Ditcheva. We know it. We know she's the best. We know that she could compete in the UFC. Stop putting everybody else in with those elite fighters, because quite frankly, evidence is showing that these fighters coming over from Bellator are not elite. Moving on, Carlos Prates. Wow. Intensity between these two all fight week. Carlos Prates really got in the face and was sort of mean mugging Jeff Neal at the weigh-ins. There was intensity between these two at the during the announcement, but we knew that the style that Jeff Neal was showing, that kind of front foot style was he needed to be very fit to be able to maintain that front foot style, and he was doing well. He was doing okay early on. I think I really do think he was doing fairly okay early on. He was catching Prates a little bit. The forward movement was being hindered from the low kicks of Prates, but Neal needed to either, and it's not in his wheelhouse, but he needed to close the distance, put his head on his chest and work in that range, or be all the way out and dive in. He needed to close the distance, I think, in my opinion, to avoid the kicks of Prates, because I think he landed a spinning wheel kick. I think he landed a spinning back kick. But when he did close that distance and try and get close to him, Prates' knee bang straight round into the liver. Horrible knees to receive. And it was just phenomenal stuff from Carlos Prates. He was hurting Neal towards the end of the round, and then that spinning elbow. I mean, I almost missed it. 4:59 of the round. Phenomenal performance, and it turns out that Ian Gary loss was just a blip. It was a great response to a loss, because sometimes fighters fight within themselves a little bit when they lose their first sort of the come up of Carlos Prates was phenomenal. Really good. He came through on the Contender Series, 4 straight finish victories, including a main event victory. He then went in with Ian Machado. Gary lost that via decision. He could have sort of almost fallen within himself and fought a little bit safe. Not his style. Really great response. Dana said that he would be he would return on the October 11th card in Brazil, and he called out Leon Edwards. Now I am annoyed that I didn't live share my notes, because I put Leon Edwards is next for Carlos Prates, and I'm annoyed that I didn't. It sounds like I'm just following his call out, but I did have that on my notes before he called him out. If he competes on that October 11th card, that fight doesn't happen. Leon Edwards is not in the business of taking fights on fairly short notice. It's a month. Let's say a month and a half away. Leon Edwards travelling to enemy territory to take a fight on short notice. I don't think that happens. However, I think that fight that's a solid call out, and I think that fight is a really good fight. And I think it's a good fight for both men. Leon Edwards can again sort of take the hype off Prates if he wins. Prates can, get the former champion, the well-renowned name on his record if he wins. I think that's the fight to make at 170. I don't think it happens on the October 11th card, so either I think Prates fights somebody else or he doesn't fight on that card at all. But just an insane spinning elbow knockout. Unfortunately for Prates, I think Leron Murphy's was better. And that is a crazy debate to be having, whose spinning elbow knockout was better. But it is what it is. Also, someone that I could see potentially facing Leon Edwards next, if he drops back down to 170, is Michael Venom Page. What a frustrating fighter to watch if you're in front of him. And that is pretty much what opponents do. They watch him. What a wonderful fighter to watch if you're a fan of his, just like I am. I'm a fan of his fighting style. It's that point fighting karate style. And he's not quite like Stephen Wonderboy Thompson in that I think he's a little bit more aggressive than Wonderboy. I thought that the size would be a factor, or much more of a factor. You've got a former heavyweight in Jared Cannonier coming down to 185. Obviously, it's not his first rodeo at 185, but he is a former heavyweight. He's going to have that power behind him against a guy in MVP whose last fight, who has competed at 170 in the UFC. I think he's fought Kevin Holland at 170. I think that was at 170, but he's definitely fought Ian Gary at 170. So I thought the size may be a real factor. But MVP's clinch work was really, really good. I think his physical size, his height, did a lot of that good aided a lot of that good clinch work because he was able to pummel under and get Cannonier off him, as it were. That knockdown in the first round, it was just such a quick knockdown. I think it was off the low kick that Cannonier didn't see it coming, nor did I. I by no means switched off, but it was just such a quick knockdown. I kind of almost missed it. And I think that the way that MVP does things, in that he sort of trash talks his opponents, but not in a trash talking kind of way. It's almost, his trash talk is to build himself up. It's not to annoy his opponents. It's not, it is because it works, but it's not to really, bash his opponents and try and get in their head and try and get them to, I don't think he's doing it in a malicious way. I think, when he knocks Cannonier down, he's saying, look, calm down. Because he knows how dangerous Cannonier is. He knows how dangerous, Cannonier's got heavy hands. If MVP rushes in there, it could be really dangerous for him. So he's sort of saying, look, calm down. I think he's both telling himself to calm down. Well, I think he's telling himself to calm down, which I personally don't mind. I don't think that's a bad thing at all. And, there was a ton of respect between both men after the fight. So you kind of know that it wasn't malicious, I think the second round knockdown caused Cannonier to be really hesitant. And it's much easier said than done, but he needed to have thrown caution to the wind there, because we saw what happened in the final round. He was dominant. He dominated that final round. He landed some big shots, just like Chimaev should have done against DDP. But for me, I've said MVP would benefit from mastering just work on one great leg lock submission and be able to threaten it all the time. Every time he's taken down, he's threatening that leg lock, and it could cause issues for his opponents. Who am I to tell MVP how to fight? He's a phenomenal fighter. His reactions and his style is captivating, because there was times where he was avoiding a punch of Cannonier and sort of almost ducking under the armpit of Cannonier out the other side, hands still down by his sides. It's just fascinating to watch. And at 185, Cannonier was ranked number 9. MVP wasn't ranked. He will now be ranked at 185. And I want to see MVP versus Adesanya next. Or if he drops down to 170, I want to see MVP versus Leon Edwards next. Now, I don't want to see him out until March, where they traditionally do the London card and have Edwards versus MVP on that London card. I think he's fit enough to return before then. If I'm MVP, he's got the speed that really kills at 185. He's carried that speed up from 170. He's always going to be fast. He carried that speed up from 170. And I really do think that the MVP is going to be a big player. I don't really put him in the same bracket. I don't technically put him in the same bracket as people like Aaron Pico, Pitbull, Patchy Mix, because he was destined for the UFC from day one. These guys weren't. And I think, okay, if you are to put him in, Bellator guys are 1 and 3 in their UFC debuts, but he is making the absolute most of his time in the UFC. He's 3 and 1 now in the UFC. He's beat Shower Bullet. He's taken that hype away from Shower Bullet. He's now beaten Jared Cannonier, former title challenger, former multiple time headline. I think he's headlined 6 straight fights coming into this. I want to see him against Adesanya next, because that would just be a stand-up battle for everyone to sit and enjoy. Such different styles of kickboxing versus the point fighting. Make that fight next. Adesanya is in no position really, in my opinion, to be sort of calling shots as to who he fights. Basically because he's lost his last 3 and he's 1 and 4 in his last 5 fights. So basically I think that is the fight to make. I think MVP versus Adesanya as a headliner anywhere in the world sells massively. I'm briefly going to touch on Tim Elliott, because it was great to see Tim Elliott back. He looked smooth despite being away for so long. He's got a crazy style where he fights like with his hands kind of out in front, and he's the kind of old school style. He was really worrying me early on from a if you're a Tim Elliott fan, it was worrying early on, because he was a lot of the herky jerky head movement, he wasn't getting his hands up at all, and Kaya Sakura is heavy handed, and it did show that there was potential issues there from the sort of side of Tim Elliott, because Tim Elliott, like I said, was getting landed on quite heavily, quite regularly in that first round. However, slick with a takedown at the end of the first round, really important takedown landed, because he was dominant on the floor as soon as it got there. And he was slick with it. He showed amazing adjustment in the second round. He's a little bit more on the front foot, and he landed that the takedown prior to the guillotine was wonderful. It was really, really good. And for me, Asakura falls into that sort of Bellator category. Although he came from Rising, he's a former Rising champion. He entered the UFC to take on the champion in his first fight, finished in the second round. He then dropped down to face the number 11 ranked guy in Tim Elliott, who's been away for, I think, since 2023. I'll just double check that. But he's been away for a long time. Yeah, December 2023. So over a year and a half out of the octagon. And he was finished by Tim Elliott. For me, Asakura is very one-dimensional. He's a heavy-handed boxer. As soon as you take him down, he does not know what to do. And that showed on Saturday night. Tim Elliott gets his second straight performance bonus, his second straight finish. And, he's now 4 and 1 in his last 5 fights. Who's next for Tim Elliott? I mean, it's always fun to play this game. Kai Kara France, maybe? Why not? But overall, UFC 319. What would I rank it out of 10? I'd give it a strong 8.5, and the only reason for that is because we didn't get a finish in the main event. I'd give it a strong 9. I'll be generous. I'll give it a strong 9. We didn't get a finish in the main event, which was disappointing. But Khamzat Chimaev is for real. That was the most dominant performance from a challenger I think I've ever seen. Maybe the Amanda Nunes versus Juliana Pena 2-1, but many expected that. Not many people expected Khamzat Chimaev to be so dominant last night. And do it with ease. It wasn't, at no point did Dricus du Plessis ever look like he didn't look like the champion last night. And that is not down to him being a poor champion. That is down to Khamzat Chimaev being an absolute killer. So, thank you for watching, guys. I'm going to do a video, I think, this week, maybe tomorrow, and release it later on in the week, because I'm going away this week, looking at the Bellator fighters that could come over and compete. If not, I'll do an article about it. But it's not a good sign for Bellator fighters. You've got Pitbull losing, Patchy Mix losing, Aaron Pico getting iced by the next title contender in Leron Murphy. it's a tough one. Thank you for listening. Like, subscribe, share the video, and all that good stuff. And I will catch you next time.